Hello, I'm Keith Spera from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. Welcome to Let's Talk. My guest today is a guitar slinger and record producer from Lafayette, whose many projects include Lil Band of Gold and collaborations with swamp pop legend Tommy McLean. He's also the go-to connection for British rock stars looking to work or have fun in South Louisiana. Case in point, he produced the Rolling Stones' contribution to A Tribute to the King of Zydeco, an all-star album celebrating the 100th anniversary of Clifton Cheniere's birth. Here to talk about all that and more is C.C. Adcock. Mr. Adcock, welcome to Let's Talk.
How you doing, sir?
I am doing fine. So, this Clifton Cheniere tribute album, out June 27th, 2025,
Right.
celebrating the 100th anniversary of the King of Zydeco, has all kinds of great artists on it. Charlie Crockett, Marcia Ball, Taj Mahal, Steve Earle, et cetera, Jimmy Vaughn, et cetera, et cetera. The big name on that bill is, of course, the Rolling Stones.
Pretty big name.
Pretty big name. They perform Clifton's song, Zydeco Ça Passe Soleil, which is the song from which Zydeco derives its name.
Yeah.
My understanding is that their participation on this record stemmed from a dinner at Antoine's, perhaps, that you helped set up?
That helped seal the deal a bit. I had known about the making of the record, and I actually produced the record's produced by, and in most part, it was produced by Joel Savoy, who has Valcourt Records, and
Joel Savoy, of course, comes from the great Savoy music family in Southwest Louisiana,
dynasty.
And it's on his label. Valcourt,
exactly,
yes.
And he's got a great label, and so he did that, and Steve Berlin from Los Lobos helped him out. Mm-hmm. This is all under the larger umbrella of everyone knowing that it was Clifton's centennial in 2025, and that actually June 25th coming up, which is our release dates, is Clifton's 100th birthday. So that was all timed like that. But anyway, years ago, people started talking about what are we going to do for Clifton's centennial. You know, I've talked to people about it, seen emails about it for a while. And so, of course, there was a big retrospective box set that's coming out on Smithsonian Folkways. And then Joel and Steve and some other folks decided that they were going to do a covers record, which is one of the ways you get people reinterested in a catalog or a reissue with a box set and a bunch of old stuff is you and I are going to buy that record because we love Clifton Cheniere, but how do you get new people?
Right, you have famous people cover the songs.
So you get people come and cover songs, so that's pretty common to do that. So anyway, they started talking about a cover record, and I got the call from Joel. I remember I was at the beach, a year and a half, 2 years ago. He goes, we're doing the cover record, and we'd love to have you and Tommy involved, and who do you think you could bring to the table? I just immediately, I just thought, the Rolling Stones. I mean, I knew that Mick and Keith loved Clifton's music and Ronnie, there's been many name checks. Mick always talks about In the Dark Bayou and the Big Bamboo. There's been some bootlegs that are where he names checked Clifton Cheniere. There's been lists where both he and Keith talk about A-Teat Fee and Bop on the Rock being big songs, Clifton songs being big influences on them. And then of course Keith used Buckwheat Zydeco and Michael Doucet on his solo records in the late 80s. Anyway.
The Stones' love of Zydeco was not a secret. I mean, they flirted with it as it's an offshoot of blues in a way. So that was what they were
exactly, and also, which is important too. Mick Jagger's brother, Chris Jagger, has a Zydeco band in England. That's probably a pretty hard gig sometimes, but being Mick's little brother, but he does cool music, and Chris is great. He plays great. He comes down here and visits, and so anyway, I was hip to the fact that they knew their stuff, and so I reached out, and I first went through Keith because I know him better, and I'm good friends with a lot of their kids. I know
a lot of the Stones.
The progeny. The
Stones progeny. The little Stones.
They're a wild bunch, pretty feral bunch. I'm not saying they weren't raised right. I'm just saying they're kind of feral.
Well, I mean, the pedigree there.
Well,
one would expect
they don't really have to answer to much, but they're all very lovely people. I mean, considering that they probably have the right to be axe murderers, given the way they weren't raised or were raised. It wasn't a Louisiana upbringing, but funny enough, they do seem like they kind of us when they're down here. They know how to party all right. But anyway, so I went through Keith, through his son Marlon, who's a good friend of mine, and I wouldn't have done it. I mean, I thought about it. I was like, wow, I can't believe I'm going to use the bat phone. I've never asked him to triangulate anything, not even tickets. You know, if he calls up and says, hey, the songs are coming through, would you like to go? That's great to have the hookup, but I never asked him to ask his daddy for anything.
Right, because you don't want to take advantage of the friendship and the relationship.
It's just I can't imagine no one can imagine what it's like having grown up like that and having everybody try to get through you to get to your folks. I mean, that's, you know,
right.
We got some old South indemnity down here, but nothing like that. So anyway, I called Marlon and he said, no, actually, yeah, that Keith loves Clifton. And I just thought it was just kinky enough. And it really speaks to how awesome Clifton is that, you know, I don't think I would have done whatever. I wouldn't do it for Dolly Parton or Buddy Guy or, you know, all these other people that I love. It's just Clifton. It was like, they just might bite at that. So anyway, we heard back from Keith that they were interested. Mm-hmm. And therein begins the whole very interesting tutorial on how the Stones work. And that was almost as fascinating as getting to get in the studio and make music with my heroes. But just watching how that organization, it's a mom and pop organization. Keith and Mick are mom and pop, and
Keith and Mick are mom and pop,
pretty much. And there's a lot of brass and a lot of handlers. But I'm here to tell you that it was music first and business later. So much so that I got freaked out halfway through making the recordings. I was like, can we get some other people copied in on this? They were just really into Clifton and really into the music and so goodwill and so gracious and just no BS. And in fact, instructed their people later on after the music was made and we had to do the business and figure out how this looks and works and is going to be disseminated and contracts and all that stuff. They expressed to everybody on their team they didn't want any special treatment. They just wanted the same deal as everybody else on the record, and they were just super, super cool and really, really respectful. The fact that we got that done is amazing. It's the first time Mick Jagger has ever sang in French on a record.
That's what I was going to say. That's one of the most amazing things about it is that Mick sings in Creole French.
Perfect mid-century Creole French, not Parisian French, and not even modern. He's saying Zarico. He's saying it just like Clifton. He does his homework.
I mean, he obviously studied Clifton's recording
without
of the
a doubt. And there's a reason that band's done so well. He takes a job very seriously, even when he's prancing around. It's all very, very thought out and from the heart. And he really loves the music first and foremost. So yeah. So anyway, knowing that we had it teed up with Keith, they came to town last year for Jazz Fest. Mm-hmm. As Mick said recently in an interview, well, that daytime festival we played in New Orleans.
The daytime festival.
That daytime festival we played.
The marquee performance.
The
marquee show.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Jazz Fest, right.
Little matinee.
Exactly, matinee show.
And that was such a great show that day. But anyway, so he was there while they were in town, and some of the children were in town, and they were staying at mine, and so we had a dinner and a lunch at Antoine's, and so you get the call, hey, can my dad come? I was like, yeah, your dad could come, but I mean, thanks for giving me an hour to try to get a private room, you know.
Dad being Mick Jagger.
Right, exactly. Right. Mick shows up, and that was fantastic, and that is sort of where we made the ask, and that was also because of the great Dickie Landry, who was in Band of Gold with me. There had been this legendary story that Dickie always told about having taken Mick to see Clifton Chenier in the 70s. They were both in LA, and they were at a party one night, and Mick heard Dickie's accent and said, where are you from? And he goes, I'm from South Louisiana. Mick immediately goes, do you know Clifton Chenier? And this is late 70s. Dickie goes, yeah, I do. He goes, oh man, I saw him once. I'd love to see him again. It's the best band I've ever seen live. And Dickie goes, you're in luck. He's playing tomorrow night in Watts. There was, a Creole high school, Verbum Day High School, where all the Creoles had migrated out from South Louisiana after the war to work in the shipyards in San Pedro. Some stopped in Port Arthur and Beaumont, but a lot of them went out west.
Yeah, I'll tell it, yeah.
A big South Louisiana Creole population out there, and to this day. And so Dickie took Mick to see Clifton at a Creole high school,
at a gym, right? A high school gym, yeah.
And of course, Mick was like, "Okay, I'll go, but I'm not working. I don't have security." Like, Dickie's like, "I promise you, it ain't gonna be no problem, partner. I just come with me." He says, "Sure enough, they walk in, and he says, there's one old lady." You walk in, everybody's speaking French. There's setups on the table, Crown Royal, with Sprite and bucket ice, just like back home.
Yep.
And he said, this one old lady was squinting and going, oh, no, it can't be. She would look again, no, it can't be. Nobody bothered Mick. And then, of course, the famous line that came from it, sort of the punchline is that when Clifton came off the stage, Dickie said, Clifton, this is Mick Jagger from the Rolling Stones. And Clifton goes, oh man, glad to meet you. Y'all wrote a nice article on me.
He thought it was Rolling Stone magazine.
Clifton thought Mick was from Rolling Stone magazine. And then of course, here come all the old ladies with their paper and pen. And Mick looked at Dickie and said, hey man, you told me it wasn't going to get me out of here. And they just reached right over Mick to get Clifton and Cleveland's autograph.
They weren't interested in Mick, they wanted Clifton's autograph.
And so whenever we met for lunch last year, Dickie was late showing. I said, man, you got to come to lunch. Mick's going to come to lunch. You got to hang and recount those days. But Mick showed up first, and I asked him about the story. Before I could even, tell him what I just told you, he goes, oh yeah, I remember Clifton thought I was from Rolling Stone magazine. I was like, oh, well, that's he corroborated the punchline, so it was perfect. And then Dickie and him did show up, and they spent 2 hours like a house on fire, just talking and reminiscing about New York in the 70s. Of course, Dickie's, fantastic career. He's up there right now doing a big opening. I saw Philip Glass and all of his old rock and roll friends are with him. So
Dickie, a great saxophone player from Southwest
and
New
great artist and great photographer, just a Renaissance coon-ass.
I love that.
Anyway, so that's when we got it done. Yeah, that's when Mick said, let's do it.
Let's do it. All right, if you're just tuning in, my guest today is Lafayette guitarist and record producer C.C. Adcock. So you produced the Stones recording of Zydeco Sans Pas Soleil. Essentially a records producer is akin to a film's director. You kind of direct the proceedings, coach, steer in certain directions. What do you tell the Rolling Stones about how to make a record?
That was a correct assessment of the job title, unless it's the Rolling Stones. And I'm one of a million people who say I'm the world's biggest Stones fan, maybe 20 million people. You just kind of sit back. Mick picked a couple of tunes that he wanted to do, and it started off with the record was sort of done. This record was sort of finished and in the can when he came back around, and so I had to
the tribute album. Most of it was done. So the Stones were like a last minute.
Yeah, a last minute thing, and I had to call up Joel and go, hey man, I got Mick on line one. I think this is going to happen. And of course, that caused everybody to go, I don't know. We've already finished the record. We gave them ample opportunity to be involved. So let's give it a shot. I think we should probably do this if we want to move the needle. The idea being that Clifton, of course, down here, he's the king. And he called himself the king of the South. But around the world, even amongst roots aficionados, Clifton's sort of an unknown B-side because he sang in French, he played accordion. I mean, he's not as well known as John Lee Hooker, certainly Muddy Waters, or
the blues guys.
And that was because he never really had a big hit. I think English was a second language, and he had a funny way of doing things. And making records to him was just something he did on the way to a gig one night. Just stop by and get some extra money to make a record. He made some great ones. But so anyway, the whole idea, and the Stones knew this, was to really move the needle. All the money from this project goes to the Clifton Chenier Scholarship at ULL in Lafayette.
University of Louisiana Lafayette, right. So the money, all the money
all of it. And in fact, the records were made with donations from private people. So from record one, it goes back straight to the kids at UL, and it allows a young person to study Creole music and play accordion and have a Zydeco band and maybe buy a trailer. And it's really hard these days to have a band. Start a band. It's really silly to think about pursuing that even at this point in the digital AI world. But this will it'll really, really help foster letting somebody really dig in. And those crucial years when you're like 18 to 21, that's when musicians sort of imprint what they're going to do and figure out if they're going to take that road.
Well, right, and this, the scholarship helps give them a leg up.
Exactly. So that's what this record. That's the idea, is just to get to let people know about it. And so Mick goes, well, when he looked at everything else that had been done, he said, send me a list of all the other tunes. I was kind of softball pitching him, do Bon Temps Roulé or just, blues or something. He's like, well, send me everything that's been done. So we did, and he came back with, should we do Zydeco Sans Pas Soleil? And of course, he knows how to speak perfect French. And he goes, isn't it about really bland vegetables? Of course, it's Zydeco Sans Pas Soleil is Le Haricot Sans Pas Soleil, no salt for my snap beans. A euphemism for being too poor to even have
afford salt or salted meat. Right.
Or maybe it's about salt in your snap bean.
Who knows? Who knows?
I don't know what Uncle Mick was thinking about when he was singing it, but he said that, you know, if that's the one, that's the tune, that's what the whole genre is named after. So if the Stones are going to do one, shouldn't we do the one? I said,
do the song that the genre was named after.
In fact, he was kind of like, why hasn't anyone done it? I said, well, that's why you're Mick Jagger and we're not. So he jumped right in. But to answer your question about producing, of course, that was fantastical. And then to hear him sing in perfect Creole, he said, make the track with some boys in Lafayette. So I was like, cool. I just thought that was going to be like a sketch demo that he could show their band or that we would use later when we all got in the studio. But
he wanted it to be Southwest Louisiana musicians.
He said, go ahead and make it with the Lafayette boys.
Yeah.
So I got Robert St. Julian, who was Clifton's original drummer, which is the real coup de grace here.
So the guy that was Clifton's original drummer back in the day played on this track with the Stones.
Yeah. Robert's still around. He's in his late 70s. I mean, he had dropped out of high school as a sophomore to play with Clifton. So he's not that old. Anyway, he's younger than the Stones. And so I got him. I got the great Steve Riley, my great partner Steve Riley from Band of Gold, who came in and
plays accordion on the track.
Played accordion, played beautiful. Dave Ransom from the Band of Gold plays with Sonny Landreth and John Hyatt. He played bass on it. And it was kind of Dave's dream to play with Robert St. Julian, who they called Chi D. He's like, oh my God, I get to play on a track with Chi D. I think he was more impressed with that than, I mean, of course, everybody was blown away.
The Stones.
But we didn't know it was going to end up being the track. I just thought I was making a sketch, maybe, as you do these days, and just to kind of show them the direction of the song and what it was, something for Mick to work on. But he came back and said, man, well, I like the track. The groove's killer. And said, let's just use that. And so he did his vocal first, and then we got Ronnie and Keith on it. Of course, these days it's really only 3 Stones to be the Rolling Stones.
Right. It's so Mick, Keith, and Ronnie. Right.
So that's how it happened.
So where did Mick do his part here in Louisiana?
No,
or
Mick he did it in Paris.
In Paris, he recorded Paris. So were you there? You went to Paris?
I did not do that. I was on a call on a Zoom. And what do you tell?
Right, you were zooming into it.
I mean, what do you say? You know, I mean, when he sends you the vocal, he goes, "What do you think of it?" You go, "Give me more attitude. Can you make it more attitude? Can you make it more like the Stones?" I mean, it was perfect. It was perfect. It was impeccable. His work ethic and his attention to detail. I mean, you know, it's the great British thing that, of course, the Stones are famous for. They can just assimilate into any style, and they're especially good at doing it with American styles, and they put it through their own sort of road-tested, wacky prism, or they put it through their own thing, and it comes out oftentimes sort of more evocative than the original versions or the original styles, because they just use that as a jumping off point. It's not pastiche. They're not trying to make an exact Zydeco record. I was told in the days leading up, to the session with Keith and Ronnie and everybody, that when those guys get together, probably always, but especially now, that they're there to make a Stones record. You know, your project, all that's cool, your culture, Zydeco, the children back at the college, we're all happy about all that, but we're here to make a Stones record. We don't get together unless we're making a Stones record. And this is the first time they've ever sang in French. This is the first time ever that they've ever contributed to a compilation in tribute of another artist.
Really?
And it might be the first time they've ever publicly given to charity. That the Stones kind of take, you know.
Wow, that's all great. If you're just tuning in, my guest today is Lafayette guitarist and record producer C.C. Adcock. Well, yeah, and the Stones have kind of been in Zydeco mode a little bit at that Jazz Fest show you referenced. Yeah. They brought Dwayne Dupsy out to play accordion on Let It Bleed, and it dovetailed perfectly with what they were doing on stage. So
and they were all smiling, and that was when watching that, not knowing I was going to have lunch the next day, but I was thinking, oh man, we got to get them to do a Zydeco track because they're just loving this.
Absolutely, and it worked out really well. Yeah, and I mean Keith's guitar parts, and you were in the studio with Keith. Though,
yeah. So the Keith and Ronnie stuff is interesting. So a little trepidation. You talk about as a producer. So Mick has this great vocal and this great harmonica playing like a banty rooster on he just comes in just running wild through the swamp on it. It was just killer. But now it's a week later, and so Keith calls and says, okay, meet me in New York on Friday the 13th and we'll get this done. You know, he says he really likes the track and he loved what Mick had done, and complimenting me. I really loving Mick's part. Like, what do you doubt that?
Right.
This really restores my faith. And like, what are you talking about? Come on. But I think it was cool to Keith. Really, this is just my color commentary. I think it was cool that Mick jumped on. And instead of Keith bringing Mick to the project, I think, I don't know, Mick went first, and so it was kind of cool. And so then Keith was really excited about it, and he got in, and therein lied the trepidation, because as a Zydeco guitar player, I played in Buckwheat's band and played with a lot of Zydeco bands over my life. I've been fired from a few Zydeco bands in my life, and it's usually, as a guitar player, you got to just stay back and kind of play a funky little part, don't get noticed until they call you, and then you better play just like Albert Collins and sting it. But until that point, just don't get noticed. Just don't do anything. And Zydeco Son Pas Soleil is a song that traditionally on a Zydeco bandstand, a guitar player and a bass player would go to the bathroom on a 4-hour dance gig, because normally it's just drums, rubberboard, and accordion on that tune. It's like an old jure. It's a rhythmic. Yeah, it's an old field song. It's been around for hundreds of years, and so you don't need really any accoutrement and accompaniment. So I was like, well, what is Keith and Ronnie going to play on this thing? It doesn't really need one guitar part, much less two. It was already kind of sounding good with just the drums and Mick and the accordion. Keith came in. I tell you, man, it was, he's my ultimate hero, and he came in and just had the most amazing tone, had that great butterscotch telly that we all know, probably the most famous guitar, the one that's started me up in Brown Sugar. I mean, that guitar is there right next to you, and it sounds just like that guitar, and it's just like perfect, iconic everywhere. And the track starts, and he just starts right in. He does every damn thing you could do to get fired from a Zydeco band. He just started before the accordion, tough ass part, louder than everybody else, just cutting it all up. And it was just like, the kid in me that had been fired from a bunch of bands and always wanted to try that experiment, never had the guts to. I was just like, yes. And it just immediately sounded like rock and roll, and it was just killer. And his instincts were, of course, dead on. And, those cats believe, therefore they become. There's not a confidence problem. No, not a confidence problem with Keith and Ronnie. And they're so good, and they kind of refigured a way, the way they've done Zydeco here. I mean, it still sounds like a great South Louisiana dance track, but it sounds like the Stones, and it's Keith. Keith is the first thing you hear. He just comes in playing this great sort of James Burton. He said, he put his pick down and started playing with his fingers, and I said, wow. He said, yeah, I'm doing that James Burton thing.
Burton, Elvis
from Shreveport,
Shreveport,
Louisiana boy, Susie Q.
Yep.
And so it just, and of course Ronnie was doing that famous weave with Keith, and they were coming in and out. So it was fascinating, and it was one of those afternoons you just pinch yourself and go, wow, the moon landing was not a hoax. These guys, they have star rocks in their pocket.
Well, and so just for you personally, I mean, you were there with a job to do, but as the Rolling Stones fan from childhood, you had to be a little freaked out that you're watching them do their Stones thing in the room with you.
There's a whole lot of fanboy, but but we just started dancing. I remember in the studio, like, if Keith was in the control room cutting with us, and it's all sort of unbelievable, and he's right there doing the Keith thing, and it's the butterscotch telly and Macabre, and anyway, it's just all a bit weird, and so just. What do you do in Louisiana when you don't know what else to do? Just start dancing. Me and a few people in the studio and his manager, Jane Rose, we started dancing and just having fun, and made Keith play well, and the boys were playing great, and the song came together real quickly. And I had brought some gumbo and some jambalaya in from some old place in Soho that was pretty good, actually. I think the place was called Filet. I give them a shout out. It was legit. Bread pudding was a bit off, but so we just had a party. We were drinking wine and having a perfect Friday afternoon.
Well, and ultimately, it's only rock and roll.
It's only Zydeco.
It's only Zydeco. It's only Zydeco.
Yes, I do.
Only Zydeco. We just have a couple minutes left here. I mean, I alluded to it in the intro. I mean, you've hung out with many a rock star. There's a great picture of you on stage with Robert Plant at BJ's Lounge in the Bywater.
We recorded the Fats thing with Robert, with Band of Gold, right?
Exactly, the Fats Domino tribute record that came out with him. You, I think, partly inspired a Florence and the Machine song by
I don't know if we can talk about
a
that.
Bleary night out one night in New Orleans with Florence Welch.
Just a crawfish boil that went on it got a little bit too boiling.
It got a little too boiled. Right, many hours later. But yes, the song Morning Elvis, she wrote that song about that night out in New Orleans with you, and Billy Squire was involved, and there's all kinds of, strange things.
Right.
So, I mean, and as you said, you've played in so many bands and done so many different things. I mean, what is your role at this point? In 90 seconds, what is your role in South Louisiana music at this point?
I mean, hopefully to help write another chapter. If you're going to take any inspiration from Clifton, it's that you got to do your own thing, and you got to put it all through your own filter, and take that inspiration from the Stones and just try to make something new out of it. I mean, we love all the stuff. We know all the stuff. We're lucky. We're a member of the Lucky Sperm Club. We just happen to be born at the right place at the right time with all this great music around us and all of our heroes accessible. So let's just take it further. That's all you can try to do.
You take what's old and you make something new out of it.
Well, if somebody could make me new, I'm the old guy now. So
you did a great job with the Tommy McLean record that came out a couple of years ago. I Ran Down Every Dream.
Yeah, when you got guys like that around, I mean, not to be cocky, but when you're working with cats like Tommy and Warren Storm and all the cats in Slim Harpo's band and Little Buck, and when you grow up around that stuff, Zeppelin and the Stones aren't that overwhelming when you start to work with them. They just love that music too, and you actually have that commonality. They like that stuff too, so they just want to get close to it, just like you and I did, and they want to play it. So it makes it very conversational, and it's not that much of a trip.
Very good.
But anyway, we're lucky that everybody loves what we do down here, and that we got so much good stuff to give them back.
Absolutely. Well, I wish you luck in continuing to be that conduit for these British guys to do cool things.
Or
with
anybody.
Folks. Anybody.
Give me a call. Young kids. Let's go make a record.
Let's do it. The record is called A Tribute to the King of Zydeco. It is an all-star salute to Clifton Chenier. It is out June 2025. Proceeds benefit a scholarship program in the University of Lafayette. I encourage everyone to get it and check it out.
It's a great record, the whole record. We only talked about one track, but the rest of it's killer.
All good. Check it out. CC Adcock, thank you for all the work you've done. Thanks for coming on the show. All right. Once again, that was CC Adcock. I'm Keith Spera. We'll see you next time on Let's Talk.